Hi, Lauren. I'm just going to run through this with you as best I can. I've been through the Google PageSpeed and all that sort of stuff, and I'm not a big fan of these sites. They are helpful. You really have to sort of have basically a degree in like server management and technology to understand what half this stuff means. Quickly though, the page speed, this is something that Google often uses, and basically it just says here are things you can do to help improve the speed of the site. But the thing is, that's great for an HTML website. This isn't an HTML web page, it's a slideshow web page, which basically there's only two things in this. There's the images and there's the script that runs it, right? Yeah, there's some stuff that loads into the page as well that, if we really wanted to, we could go in here and really uh, nut the thing off to the style sheets and whatnot, go through them and try and keep all these things happy. But you're gonna get it might show up as a better number here, but the actual speed at which the page still loads up for your visitor is not going to have a difference, right? You're still loading a lot of images. And just to sort of go through this, minify CSS, what this basically says is these style sheets here, you run them through a CSS minifier, which basically means you cannot edit that style sheet on your end once you do that. Okay, and that's great if you never plan on making an update to your style sheet. We never minify the CSS. That's totally up to the end user if you want to do that, because when you minify it, let me just show you what it looks like. Right, here's what a typical style sheet that we put into this template looks like. You can actually read it, paragraph tag, describes what it's doing. You can go through, change the color. Okay, I'm going to copy this into a CSS minifier right here. Okay, and I'm going to hit minify, and here's the output. I'm going to copy this back in, and this is what this report is telling you that you should do with your CSS. That. What it basically means is it says, get rid of all the white space in here. Well, if you get rid of the white space, yeah, do you save a bit of file size? You save a few kilobytes. Can you read this and make use of it? No, not really. You can't. So that's why we never do it. So that's just that one explained there, simply because that's one of the big pain in the neck things. And the rest we really get into sort of, here's a server scaled images. Okay, so what it's saying here is, there's an image that's such a dimension, but it's being used for something that's a little bit smaller. And what that means is, right here, see we have the thumbnails down here? Well, this large picture is also used for the thumbnail down here. That way you don't have to load in two separate files. So this report is actually inaccurate because it's saying server scaled images. That would actually harm the performance of the page, because what it wants you to do is load in a small version of the image and the large version of the image, thinking that, well, if the image is being used at a smaller scale, which would be right down here, then you don't need to use a great big image for that, unless of course you're in a photo slideshow and you're using the large image up here and the smaller scaled down version of the image right here. So yeah, in that case it makes sense to only load the image once but load the large image. Right? And this is where we get a little bit mussy here. Specify image dimensions, right? So it's saying, hey, there's no image dimensions. No, they're not, because they're loaded in through JavaScript and not HTML. Right? So when we look at the page, if we actually did a view source, right, here's the page source here. When I was talking about the style sheets, we can actually remove some of these style sheets. They're not going to, we need the mega menu, no, we probably need most of them. Okay, but here it is right here. There's the images right there being loaded into the page. There's no image size associated with it, simply because it's loaded in through JavaScript, and we don't need to put an image size in the JavaScript. But of course it's being detected as there's an image being loaded in, but there's no actual image dimensions associated with it. As a matter of fact, you cannot associate image dimensions with an image any longer because it is non-responsive if you do that. If you actually had an image in here, right, and we're just going to resize see what happens when I resize the browser? The image scales. If you put a size, like a height and a width on the image, guess what? It wouldn't scale any longer. It would actually stick to that size that you specified. So there's yet again an outdated specification, this thing right here, specify image dimensions. It doesn't work for mobile web browsing. Leverage browser caching, leverage this one here. That's a server-side setting. You would actually have to talk to your web host about it. The same with the enable gzip compression. Okay. Now avoid CSS import, which is basically saying in our logo style sheet, this is where we import the Google fonts. And that's one of those things where I said, we could go through the style sheets and make a few changes, but it's not going to change the speed at which your slideshow loads. All right. Combine images using sprites, not a chance. And what this means is there are certain images that are used within the page, right? See all these things down here? Let's take a look at that. All those images down here, the bar, the button, those are all separate images. What this thing is saying is, let's put all those images into one thing called a sprite, and then modify the CSS so that you can reposition the one single image all over the place. Well, that may work for a regular HTML page, but for JavaScript, I wouldn't even know how to do it. This is a JavaScript type of thing, and I'm not going to muck with that because honestly I don't know how. So defer parsing of JavaScript, and what this is saying is there is something called defer, which you can add to a JavaScript tag, which says, for example, you could put defer on this, and these things would load after the DOM element of the web page has finished loading. And that's fine and dandy as long as these things do not require jQuery. If they do, you cannot use defer, right? And of course, this thing's not going to know if it needs jQuery or not, but right here it says jQuery UI, right? jQuery min. All these things here actually require jQuery to run first. And if you use a defer, what that happens is basically it just says, oh, it's going to load all these JavaScripts into the page in whatever order it can. So if you have a JavaScript file that's 50K and one that's 2K, and they both sort of start loading at the same time, well, the 2K file is going to be loaded before the 50K file. But if the 2K file requires anything that's actually in the 50K file, it won't work because that file hasn't finished loading yet. So they have to download and be executed in a certain order in order to work properly. And if you have JavaScript that does not require jQuery, then you can do that. If the JavaScript files do require jQuery, you can't. You cannot use defer, because then those files might actually load before the jQuery file loads, and then things that require jQuery just won't run. So I hope that was a bit of an explanation. So that's why I don't use that. Enable keep alive, it's a server setting. Minify JavaScript, that's the same thing with CSS and the same thing with HTML here. That's why we don't do those, because you can't read the content, or you can't read the script if you have to go and fix something or whatnot. And then the rest are, there's a server thing there, and then the rest are all in green. So the bottom line is, I just wanted to run through that explanation, because some folks see this stuff and get a little bit panicky. Oh man, it's not gonna work. Well, no, once you understand what it all means, then you understand that these tools, they have a place, but just because it spits out a number, you have to understand why that number's there and what these things do. And are there some things you could do to change it? Yeah, I've gotten Google PageSpeed up to like 98% on certain web pages. But this is not one of those types of web pages that I even bother with, because it's a photo page, right? That's what it does. It displays photos. It's going to take a little bit longer to load, because images by nature are going to be a lot larger than HTML. I mean, a big HTML web page is like 40 or 50K, but your first picture is 200K on its own. So it's just that first picture alone is 4 times larger than what a normal HTML for a web page would be. So, it's going to take a little longer. I just wanted to run through that with you.